aliens at Area 51. On the latest episode of Specialist of the Strange radio show, we talked about the idea of extraterrestrial life, technology, what have you, being stored at Area 51 due to this big quote-unquote raid that was supposed to happen. Now, thankfully, the raid itself has been relatively uneventful. A few music fests popped up, that's about it. Last time I checked, there was only 2 official arrests in connection with the raid, if we don't count the 2 YouTubers that got busted last week. So, due to how this type of discussion works, I felt like we probably need to elaborate a few things because certain topics involved within, especially extraterrestrial phenomenon, can be kind of confusing to most people. And makes sense. Some of the most brilliant minds out there have a hard time making sense of these things. So let's get into it. First off, I would like to start off with towards the beginning of the episode, I disclosed that Area 51 has been used in paramilitary training, and that there may be some threat that early Al-Qaeda and ISIS fighters, led by Osama bin Laden, may have spent some time there. I will admit that these threads are very thin, but you really have to look at the history of the CIA to realize that a lot of shady shit's been going on. There's been several whistleblowers who have said that basically any and every major terrorist attack can somehow be related back to the CIA. In fact, you get drug trades coming out of Colombia. The CIA actually has a hand in those. So, I'm just saying, all things considered, we're talking about Area 51. There's a lot more shady shit going on other than aliens. But let's go into it. Is there actually any credible threat of aliens being at Area 51? Let's go over a couple topics real quick. Yes, I'm using a dirty sock. I should probably pick up some more supplies. But the freaking chip on my card is being picky with me, flagging me down every time I try to just get myself a soda. Anyway, so let's go into this real quick. And I know this reflection off the light bulb is probably annoying as hell, but I haven't really found a good way to kind of hide that and keep the light source I need with my current setup. Christmas and my birthday's coming up, so maybe I could take advantage of those times. Hey, that's how I got this far. So, let's talk about the idea of aliens being from another world. I tried to give a visual of a large pizza. So, give me one sec. We're going to try, let's say, for shits and giggles, that is the center of our Milky Way. And we're just going to, this is not to scale at all, but it's just going to be a rough illustration to prove my point. Let's see. It's me there. I don't look so far. Yeah, probably do. Edit for any post. Okay. Oh, what is this? That looks good. So this is a rough illustration of the Milky Way galaxy. Now let's say let's use this. Our planet, let's say we're right on the outer rim. So let's just say for this illustrative purpose, we're about right here. About right here. How much can extraterrestrials see? Let's say, let's use this magnet right here, that another intelligent civilization that is close to our level of technology today is roughly over here. This is us. This is them. So let's see. Now we're just looking at the Milky Way, because if we were to implement other galaxies, it just takes up too much space. So just keep things simple. We're looking at the Milky Way. Let's see, we're about right here. The extraterrestrials, the other aliens, are right there. Let's say, for example, that these guys have a relatively same technological level as us. They have their own SETI programs. They have basically their life on their planet is not much different from ours. They may have had a couple thousand years more to work with, but they're still roughly within our area. How SETI works is that it looks for anomalous radio waves, because these tend to travel farther, faster, and stay relatively easy to find. Because they're wide enough, even though the signal will deteriorate over time as it spans out, we can still see enough of it to pick up and say, hey, something's over there. So how big is our influence? How far have radio signals that have carried our TV, music, so on? How far is that spread? Roughly like that. Can you actually see that? Okay. So, now this isn't to scale, but it shows enough of our problem. If this is how far our radio signal has gone, how the hell are the aliens going to know we're here? This area of the galaxy may be completely void of life, according to what they can see. Now let's just say, now they've been around for a little bit, their signal is roughly like that. Still, how is it going to get from there to there? It remains to be seen. The way we're looking for extraterrestrials, we're not going to be able to see that. That part of the galaxy may be completely void of life, according to what we've been able to find over the years. Now, maybe during this stage of this planet's evolution, you get microbial life, simple organisms. Maybe you start getting a few complex organisms in there, but nothing technologically advanced enough to be able to create that. That planet could easily have existed for a few million years. We would have never known. Now, our scientists are pretty good about spotting these type of things with our current telescope arrays, but nevertheless. this creates a problem. Excuse me. So, let's say we're able to toss aside 99% of UFO reports as completely bogus. Misidentified aircraft, hoaxes, the cliche weather balloon, whatever have you. Let's just say, for example, we can toss aside 99% of UFO reports, which is usually the case. What about the ones that are still true? What about the stuff that's still happening? Like I showed earlier in the diagram, if that is how other civilizations are finding us, then why the hell are we still seeing them here? Maybe their civilization's been around long enough to where they could have better radar equipment. Maybe they've had spacefaring missions that essentially work like Wi-Fi boosters. They help boost the signal up anywhere in the galaxy to help them detect other forms of life in the universe. Maybe that's the case. We don't know yet. This is the stuff that leads to many science fiction novels. Nevertheless, why are they still showing up? This is where it gets interesting. There are plenty of conspiracy theories where they say the ETs are actually extra dimensional. Then they may be from our distant future. They may be evolutionary descendants of us. And for the ones that are essentially time travelers, the story goes is that something happens in our planet's future that destroys a lot of historical evidence. And so they use this advanced equipment once they realize it can move through time to try to re-record everything. It'd be an ambitious project, but if you got the tech, it's not going to matter. So how would this work? A lot of people tend to get the ideas of parallel worlds, universes, realities mixed up due to how science fiction novels and dimensions, I should add that, due to how a lot of science fiction works portray this. So how does that work? For this example, we're going to try to use simple circles, okay? It's going to be the easiest way to put this to show some perspective on a 2D surface. Because by the time you try to illustrate fourth dimensional objects on a two-dimensional surface, that's when things start getting a little bit more difficult. So you can use simple circles. So just give me a sec. Okay. Yeah, that's as far as we're going to go right now. With this illustration I have here, these individual dots represent zero dimension. Smaller circles around them are first dimension. The ones that enclose two circles, dimension. That one's looking kind of lonely. Third dimension, and so on. So right now, as we understand dimensions, they're merely measures of, they're simply measurements. How we measure things in the universe. According to current understandings of string and superstring theory, once we get out to the fourth dimension, that is when we deal with time. So, any works of science fiction where you hear where an extraterrestrial is from a fourth dimension. These larger circles, say we have E.T. That's a horrible drawing. They're a fourth dimensional creature. Our three-dimensional world is a part of their world. They can easily interact. Now, if they were to interact, they're going to look kind of funky. They're going to look kind of constantly morphing. They might even actually be able to change their age according to some theories that are out there. But nevertheless, being that this entity is in a fourth dimensional space, it can go into any point within the three-dimensional world in time that it wanted. Now let's say by the time we get fifth dimension, so let's just say this outer space here is a fifth dimensional creature. And we're going to give a little antenna and three eyes. A fifth dimensional creature could technically go to any three-dimensional world it chooses at any point in time. So if someone says you're dealing with a fifth dimensional creature, there's one of two ways that can be interpreted. Number one, they exist on a planet or on a world where that basically, how was I going to put this? Where they live, every aspect of time within multiple realities that make up the fifth dimension. Because you got to remember, whenever we get to the first dimension, where it's usually just portrayed as a flat line, that's usually considered 2 points of zero dimension. Then you have 2 dimension, a flat surface, so on and so on. And so if an extraterrestrial was from a fifth dimensional world, they're going to look really weird to us because we can only perceive 3 dimensions. However, in most cases, if someone says they're from the fifth, in a situation where they're from the fifth dimension, what we're looking at most likely is we're looking at beings that are from one third dimensional world traveling to another. At this point, it's starting to not make a lot of sense. Like a lot of garbage, so we're just going to go and erase that. The reason why I say this is because you can actually look on the FBI official website, and there are documents stating, and they're dated back in the 60s, that they have actually been researching UFO phenomenon for quite some time, and it also indicates contact was made. These extraterrestrials were saying that they came from another universe, another dimension. And they were coming here to potentially live. So instead of aliens coming from Mars to here, for example, what we're essentially looking at. What did I just do with that? Ah, get over here, you bastard. Pardon my language, but. So essentially, instead of aliens coming from another planet, which still may be the case, we don't know. Our government has been keeping us in the dark, mostly because they're just as confused as we are. And we have proven over several times that we cannot handle new information that changes how we observe our world. So essentially, what we are looking at we are observing extraterrestrial life being able to utilize their aircraft to go through this jarbled mess of how quantum fabric within the universe interacts within itself, being able to either create or find points in which everything intersects to where they can easily just pass through, or they're close enough to where they can break through. So the idea is that if they're coming from other dimensions to find another place to live, when you really think about it, the Men in Black movies may have not been too far off. This presents an interesting question. What all is out there? So according to some conspiracy theorists, we are looking at 57 alien species interacting with our world at some point. And now, just to kind of go into detail about the types of beings we're looking at here, we have cliche grays. We have this type of drawing is going to look kind of lazy, but we have the reptilians. Some have even speculated that, and I'll be honest, I'm kind of skeptical of this idea, but we have Sasquatch. Some people have speculated that Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and other species related to these beings might actually be extraterrestrial in nature. We also have quite a few humanoid ones. We have the blonde Aryans. Look very human, but may have had interactions with the Nazi regime. Now, some of the more interesting ones, we have, let's see, what would be a good color? The ants. We allegedly have ant-like beings interacting with us. There's another interesting one is the Leos. Essentially, these guys look like humanoid lions. They look like humanoid versions of big cats. And what's interesting about these ones is that they are stated to come from a 12-dimensional world. When it comes to string theory and superstring theory, usually top out about 10, 12 dimensions. By the time we reach that, that is a point in which anything is possible. The Leos, they may be coming from a world where physics doesn't really apply to them. Completely different rules. Now you have to consider, if this is true, what are those worlds like? What are they like? How would we be able to interact with them if we wanted to? Question is, that's the main question. Now, you have abduction cases where the reptilians, the greys, and a couple different other species are attributed. Like I mentioned before, Area 51 was started by an assignment given by a CIA agent from President Eisenhower, who, as some of you may know, is alleged to have made a pact with the extraterrestrials that would allow them to experiment on us while they give us new equipment. Revelations about the UFO phenomenon and the government coming out and saying, okay, here's the thing. That shit's real, and we don't really know what's going on. Okay? That's why we're keeping it secret. We want to make sure we're smart. We want to make sure you all are safe. A lot of the species that have interacted with our world have shown no real signs of hostile intentions, but we can't really take that chance. Because if they were to attack us, get a War of the Worlds type situation, the government will have to basically release any alien tech they may have kept hidden from the public in order to have a chance. But you also have to consider the possibility, if that was the case, who's to say the tech that they gave us is going to be any good anymore? A lot like how militarized SWAT teams came to be. If you really look at it, the government issued military weapons given to a lot of police districts were actually used. They were used weaponry when it first started. So chances are, it may not be as good. It might be a little worn out. How are we going to know? We never played with that type of stuff before. Unfortunately, while I do try to present skeptical points of view when it comes to a lot of the topics I present on my show, the UFO phenomenon is one that you can't really ignore. As a general rule of thumb, I tell people to follow the 1% rule. Basically, it states all stories that are out there, have at least 1% truth to it. The trick is going to be find out how much of that 1% is complete bullshit. The other 99%, not necessarily completely hoaxes. It could be misunderstood natural phenomena. It happens all the time. It's happened throughout history. And there's going to be several things that people consider paranormal now that may not be considered that way in the future. I mean, one example is how people in ancient civilizations viewed thunder and lightning as a sign that the gods were angry. And we know now that that's not necessarily the case. But they do know how to mess with it. I will tell you that right now. Some of the gods from ancient civilizations, yeah, they're real. Some of them operate as angels or demons, and they know how to mess with weather if they want it. Because now I've also hinted that spiritual phenomena may have actually something to do with other dimensions interacting with our own. The same mechanics that allow extraterrestrials to be able to travel through the universe, to be able to travel through multiple universes, essentially from all things considered, it looks like their craft is somehow able to react as photon particles can as they travel, particles of light. And it's been well documented that when you look at the universe in those eyes, weird things tend to happen. So there's a lot more to be talked about on this situation. So in order to keep time, that's where I'm going to call it for today, my friends. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode, Specials of the Strange radio show. It should air on the, wow, already more than halfway done through September. The next episode should air on the 27th, and we're going to talk about a bit more about the extraterrestrial species that have allegedly been interacting with life here on Earth. Where they come from, what do they look like, and so on. It's an interesting topic to discuss, nonetheless. So, be sure to tune in, like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys.